for all the people out there with a dream that just want to be seen. Yeah, my dream's bigger than the average.
Welcome to another episode of the Be Seen podcast, episode 15. Today, I have one of my screenwriting mentors from university where I studied at Liverpool John Moores back from 2011 to 2014. This is John Maxwell. This is the gentleman who taught me how to screenwrite, who set me on the path, who gave me mentorship, who gave me direction, who showed me the text to read, to understand the craft and how it works. John.
Hello.
Honor. 10 years
Hello.
after. 10 years after.
10 years.
On the podcast.
10 years. Oh my God. That makes me 28.
I'd say 27. Let's be fair.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. Doing well.
John, please share with us your journey. Share with the world
Wow.
where you got to and
Wow.
everything, how it all began.
I've just sort of always been interested in telling stories, really. And I think, a lot of that kind of chimes with my latest thing, which is this a novel, Water Street, to tell you about in a little bit. It's a kind of American Civil War Western yarn set in Liverpool, based on not just one true story, but a collection of true stories. There were in 1863 there were Confederate and Union spies crawling all over the city. It was a bonkers thing, and they had warships getting built here. So there was a direct involvement with the American Civil War in Liverpool. But I'll get into that in a minute. That sort of typifies what sort of drew me into storytelling from a very young age. It took me a while to actually get to it in terms of doing it in what you might call professionally or academically. I think I spent a lot of time sort of swanning around. I did a degree in Russian in London, basically because they'd have me. I was kind of good with languages, so I sort of went in there in the early 90s, and it just turned out to be the craziest university you could ever go to. It was full of like ex-spies and so forth. So I suppose I've always been sort of drawn towards espionage and thrillers and so forth. The stories I got from that place were, oh my God, completely off their heads. So, going back further, when I was a kid, I come from very much a storytelling family. My dad was a musician. He was a jazz musician in Liverpool. He used to play all the basement bars in Toxteth, all the dive bars, the Caribbean clubs. So we've all, my mum was from Toxteth as well, so at Liverpool late. So there's a strong sort of connection with that part of Liverpool. And they'd tell me stories like kind of oral tradition stories going back 3, 4, 5 generations, going really back to what they sometimes call the potato famine, the Great Hunger, where thousands upon thousands of Irish landed on the pierhead and kind of came off the landing stage. And the Irish like to tell stories. We know this. It's a given, So this is sort of transposed generations, and it's been one I'm into. And I think I started making films. I got an agent, nearly sold a novel to Penguin years ago before I even started making films. And I kind of hit the bar with that. And it rather than go, oh, woe is me, aren't I unlucky? I just sort of went, no, it's a lesson. Learn from it. And I picked myself up and did the masters and started making short films, got a sort of few commissions, a few bites on that, started getting a bit of funding from National Lottery this is kind of the early days of the National Lottery, really. So we started making films, short films. That got me into the film industry, as it were. So it got me connected.
Yeah.
Going off to festivals like Cannes and Berlin and Toronto, AFM, American Film Market in Los Angeles. All these places, Rotterdam. Just sort of floating around the industry, feeling like a bit of an itinerant, a sort of hobo, a film industry hobo. That's what it became. Trying to get funded to make films, trying to you know, and it's amazing, really. That taught me, you know, how many degrees of separation there are in the film industry. It's very small, very small. And it also kind of a byproduct of that sort of drew me away from writing in a weird way. I started teaching at LJMU, and that's how I came across you, John, back in the day. So that began, and I was teaching screenwriting, but was also producing films. Produced a film called Don't Worry About Me, which is the actor David Morrissey's directorial debut. Another film called The Be All and End All. Both sort of bittersweet Liverpool comedies. They did all right, you know. They got onto BBC and got pretty good distribution and so forth. And all the while, I'm still teaching, you know. So I made Violet City from. We started shooting that in 2010. Shot it on a green screen. That was a kind of gothic steampunk fantasy because I've always wanted to kind of test the boundaries of what you could do, and it was a nut job of a film. I mean, I still now wonder why the hell I took on something. Why did I just do something that was, you know, in a haunted house or something, as Roger Corman says, but no, decided to do that. And then, well, you're getting the whole history here, mate.
This is wonderful. Keep it coming, John. Love it.
So, and then 2016, I had a mad period in my life. My wife, well, I found out, well, my mum passed on with cancer, and then my wife got cancer. And this all happened within 3 months. Just, you know, it was a kind of a 1-2 punch. And the second one was a bit of an uppercut, to be honest. It took me right down. So that sort of put me out of action and made me rethink. And the weird thing is that, you know, I must say she's doing really well now. Like she's cancer free. You know, she even went out and made a play about it, and you know, so I'm very, very proud of her. But that period, 2016, you go on that cancer journey very often, not always. Everyone's got a different story to tell, but it took 3 years really. You know, all the treatment, chemo, all that stuff. If you're with someone, they're your partner, you got to be there for them. That's your main job in life. That's your main preoccupation. So all the while I'm doing that, I'm sort of got me like sort of down periods where I'm keeping the teaching just about spinning, but it was difficult, but I kept it going. And little pockets of time, I'm sort of playing around with a few ideas for novels because I thought, well, if I can't go out and make a film, what can I do? I know, I'll go back to novels. And I sort of fell in love with it again, completely. You know, a novel is sort of like, and people might laugh at me for saying this, but it's sort of the ultimate interactive experience. If you read a novel and it's good, you feel like you're there. You know, it's more immersive than I love film, deeply love film. I'm a cineast, you know, I love it. But in a sense, it go places that even the film can't go. It can go into sort of inner space. Yeah, I started enjoying that. And then, of course, Mr. COVID came along.
Yeah.
And completely drove a coach and horses through everyone's shit, including mine. So, yeah. But in a way, again, lemons and lemonade. What happens? Well, a few things happened. I started really kind of stacking them up. I mainly got back into the spy genre because I realized that this is something I'm into, something I know about. You know, the fact is I couldn't knock a hole through a wet echo. So, you know, it didn't make me a very good James Bond. But I sort of knew people who actually were either the children, some of my best mates actually were children of bona fide spies, or were actually in the service themselves one way or the other. And this is entirely through my connections to London back in the day. And it gave me confidence and made me think, actually, I know about this world. And something I always kind of tell my students is like, you know, fall in love with the world. I mean, it's sort of that old statement by Stephen King, write what you know. There's truth in it, but I would extend that by saying, you know, fall in love with the world that you're writing. You know, get attached to it or get passionate about it. You can fucking hate the world you're writing about, you know, but it has to be a kind of strong passion. It has to be something like, so this kind of sort of starts to bring you up to present day. I hooked up with an agent who is brilliant, Claire Coombs at Liverpool Literary Agency. So she's the only literary agent in Liverpool. One of her, I could count on one hand the amount of literary agents there are outside of London. And what she's done is she started a business up during the pandemic, and she's soaring. She's getting book deals left, right, and centre. And she got one for me, which was absolutely, incredible. And I went on this journey with a book called Water Street, which is what I started talking about at the beginning, which is the thing I'm just mad about. And again, it goes back to that thing about being passionate. You've got this came from two things really, two starting points, both connected with my parents. One is the oral tradition, all these stories about. I don't like the expression potato famine because it sort of infers that it was a famine, and from what I know of history, it wasn't. It was basically the British doing the Irish over. But what kind of came of it was, all these sort of family stories, and I've always wanted to do something about that period. Now, the history of this city, now you look at Liverpool, and it's great. You get Eurovision. We are getting back in the map in a lot of ways. It's just great, however sort of cheesy that might be, but we're still going for it. But back then, Liverpool, in terms of equivalence, and this blows a lot of people's minds, was the equivalent of a city of 6 million people. So over 10 times the size it is now. It was a metropolis. It was absolutely huge. It was rivaling London in terms of the amount of money that was coming into the place. There's a lot of new money, people making very quick fortunes, essentially over cotton, ergo slavery. So what you've got in this period, and this is what made me so interested in it, what you've got, 1863, is two main things, two massive world-changing events going on. One was the Irish diaspora. So you've got people just having to leave. It's basically, you either leave or you die. That simple. So you got millions of people leaving Ireland. Some of them stayed here, some of them went over to New York and different parts of the world, mainly the US and Canada and so forth. But Liverpool's population shot up, and you had ridiculous poverty here. You had people sleeping in slums on the streets, all the kind of crime, vice, all that kind of thing. So that's what Liverpool was in 1863. It was either you massive wealth, or it was the other end of the scale. And it was kind of like Rio or something like that. It was sort of, or a kind of a third world sort of state. So you had that, but you also had something else. And I found out about this very recently, which was the American Civil War. And this sort of really boiled my piss, to be honest, when I found out about it, because I'm very passionate about Liverpool in many ways. But I just thought that's just horrible. What was going on was there was a Union blockade of the southern states of the US. So this was all part of the war. The Union side, which eventually won, the Blues, they had a navy, so they could do this, and they stopped the southern vessels getting in and out. So it was a sort of trade blockade. So the Confederacy are kind of losing money, but not only that, you've got a knock-on effect. You've got all these extremely rich guys in Liverpool, and they're all guys, they're all fellas, operating at the Cotton Exchange, and they're pissed off to the extreme. And you combine someone who's very rich with being pissed off. Usually, you've got trouble. Usually, you've got problems. So, what happened off the back of that was they had this cotton drought. They couldn't bring any cotton, which was the kind of the white gold that was coming into the northwest of England. Not just Liverpool, but all the mill towns, all of that kind of economy, that it became very, very rich and industrialized. Was suddenly in trouble, cut short. So what do these guys do? They say, right, we want to put money behind the Confederacy. We don't care. Britain's declared itself neutral officially. That's the official position. They don't want to get involved. They had the Crimea 10 years back. They don't want another shit show like that. They want to stay out of it. But in Liverpool, no. We've got the money. We've got the power. We're going after you. So you had this is how important the city was. They had a US consulate in Liverpool. So almost like a kind of embassy in Liverpool. And you had a consul there who's trying to stop all this. So he's challenged it in the courts, but he's also got a network of spies going on. My story is kind of based on real people. So it's based on that guy, which was a guy called Haynes Dudley. But also there was a character called, or a person, a real person called James Dunwoody Bullock, who was commissioning ironclad boats, so warships essentially, built a Confederate Navy out of Camel Lead shipyard over in the Wirral, sailing out under a Union flag, so hoisting the Union Jack, sailing out through the Mersey, and then as soon as they get to the Mersey, Confederate flag goes up and they go and smash through Union vessels, getting literally built. They've got these huge kind of iron blocks in the front of them and they smash through the hull of all the vessels, ram into them, and just kind of try and destroy this dominance of the Union Navy. So, and it would have made a massive difference in the war. My story, Water Street, is essentially about this guy, but I've renamed him because I needed a bastard, to be honest. I wanted the guy to be an out-and-out bastard, a handsome bastard, but an out-and-out bastard. So I call this guy Bannister Dunwoody. He's a kind of a rogue. His background is a bushwhacker in Tennessee and Louisiana, a sort of a river pirate, and a scumbag, an utter scumbag. But what happens in war is, again, scumbags become people who are in demand, and he rises up very quickly. He becomes like this Confederate commander, and he's tasked to come to Liverpool and get even more out of the more money out of the city. And ultimately, well, too many spoilers, he wants Britain to join the war on the side of the Confederacy. Now, I'll tell you this now, John, if that would have happened, the world would be a very, very, very different place now. Very different. So, high concept. The other thing, and this is kind of just winding her up, the main character, who's sort of like the force of heroism of the story, is actually this guy's wife, who is a spy for the Union side. So his own missus is spying on him and looking to messes act up, completely destroy what he's doing, trying to sabotage him in any way she can. So that's how this sort of book sort of unravels. Partly true, partly sort of stuff I've come up with, but the journey going on that and found out stuff about this city, which is just incredible, and our relationship with the United States. It's not just a local story. It's actually something that underpins world history. It's got that sort of that powerful of a link. So that's Water Street, and that's what I'm up to now. I've got a book deal for with a great publisher called Benyon Kearney. They're amazing. And we're just working up to now. It's going to be out on July the 1st, but probably within the next week or two, we'll be taking pre-orders. So if there's any links you can put in, I'll throw in a link to that. So that's what's coming up. I'm obviously, with my sort of film background, sort of got an eye for probably television for this, although I did write a screenplay for it. But yeah, that's all kind of, it's there, and it's something I'd love to do because obviously, that's my background. But I realised that it would cost 40 million to do the pilot episode, probably. That's how that was the figure in my head anyway. But to be honest, the main thing for me is just to get eyeballs on the novel because I want to write more of them. That's my main bag. I want to write more of them. I've got a whole series based upon this character lined up. Next one's going to cover the Lincoln assassination because another true story about Liverpool is in the Lincoln assassination, a guy called John Surratt escaped, and he was one of the main people behind it. Basically, it was a pair of actors who were recruited, John Surratt and John Wilkes Booth, to bump off President Abraham Lincoln. And this guy, he escaped to Liverpool. But the weird thing is he escaped here and they knew he was here and they didn't even try to get him deported. They could have, they should have done. Do you think about it? You're involved in killing of a president. They should have just hauled his ass back to America and hung him because that's what probably would have happened in all logic. But for some reason, some very, very weird reason, he didn't. And he hit out here. So there you go. I've got a long list of them. So some people will ask, if you're a novelist, if you got an influence, which writers you influenced. And obviously I'm influenced by James Elroy, even kind of mad stuff like Thomas Pynchon, like, Gravity's Rainbow, really kind of psychedelic, weird stuff. I love weird stuff. I love kind of stuff that just takes you into a different place. But predominantly for me, I was influenced by films. And many of the films I was influenced by, particularly for this book, plug it again, Water Street, the Sergio Leone westerns, spaghetti westerns. So you look at like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for instance.
It's funny you say that because in my final year, I focused solely on Sergio Leone. On the way to take wide portrait shots of scene from paintings and apply them into his films.
Yeah.
I studied all of his films in that year. Love him, master.
Well, I've always wondered, and again, it's a curiosity about this. Like, the same period of time, you had so much going on. You had the Victorian era here, so everyone goes, "Oh, Sherlock Holmes," and the Yanks love it. Americans love Sherlock Holmes, all that. And yet, over here, have always had this kind of fascination with the Wild West. So there's this sort of thing going back and forth between Europe and the United States. We love the Westerns. They love our kind of Victorian shit. Water Street's both. Water Street's a Western that's going on here. Yeah. And that's where the influences come from. So you look at something like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's not a kind of history lesson. And in a sense, yes, it's all there. Like, you want to go away and research it, look into it. You can see all the true stories, and that underpins it. I have done my research, but in a sense, it's a Western yarn. It's a crack. It's something that's kind of like, oh, what's this all about? You look at The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That has scenes with Confederates. The famous scene where you've got the kind of cavalry steaming in, and they think that they're being rescued by the Confederates because they've got like these kind of pale blue sort of grey uniforms, and they dust it off, and it's the Blue Union, and it's like, oh, you're in the shit now. You've been caught by these guys. Now you could go away and look into the history of the battles and everything like that, but the fact is, it's that kind of moment, that sort of tension that creates, and that's again what sort of motivated me. I wanted those sort of big set pieces. Yeah. I'm trying to think of a way I could justifiably have a whole platoon, not just a platoon, a whole bunch of Union soldiers parading up Castle Street in Liverpool with a cannon in Victorian times in Britain. How is that possible? Well, it happens in this.
I love that. Hey, a question for you, John, right? From your early experiences of filmmaking, yeah? From how you would write a screenplay originally, for these short films and then filming them, to how you think about a screenplay today. Has it changed?
Yeah. It's changed. I think fundamentally in some ways it hasn't. I'd say refined. I think it's been refined. I think I used to be, and a lot of this came down to my personal circumstances in the way. I used to be the most gung-ho person when it came to getting the film made. Go and experiment, Sure, I'm a massive fan of short films. I think that a lot of problems that filmmakers have span from actually going, oh, I'm just going to go and dive into a feature project, and then it'll kill them. It'll kill the passion for it. First and foremost, if your passion goes, that's it, you're dead. You go and work in a bank. You got to have that passion. So first thing you do is go and make some short films, if you can, get a bit of money. Make sure everyone's fed. Pay people a few bob. The difference that makes is incredible. The upsurge in professionalism you get from, a few mates knocking around, doing it for sandwiches, to, I'm getting a few quid for this. I need to take it seriously. And you can get good people in as well. You get people, in the northwest of England, in Liverpool, there's a lot of really good crew. Who are used to working on big productions, either TV or film, who will step up. So, massive craft. It's really difficult to write a good short film. I'll say that. In a lot of different ways, because and let's make no bones about it, you're not going to make any money from a short film, no matter how good it is.
No way.
You might win an award. You might, if you're lucky enough, you get it in the right place and you do it well enough, you might win an award, and that might give you a little bit of impetus. But the thing it does for, I reckon, more than anything else, as a writer, is a writer should have their hands dirty. He should be a producer. There's very, very few who can afford to not be a producer, unless you're absolutely stacked with money and you can go, I tell you what, I've just written the script. I'm going to hire someone in to do this for me. I haven't got a bloody clue about filmmaking. Yeah, boom, there you go. That's a cat and else chance. Most people, most students that I talk to, and this goes back to when you were around with us and going back, I would always say, don't just write the thing, go out and make it.
Mm.
Yeah. And you can backwards engineer that. You can say, don't just go out and make it. Write something that you can go out and make.
100%.
Even if it comes down to one of these. Oh, you got my staff cough, Mel Jamie, either. Yeah. Even one of these, just take it out. It can look rough as shit, but it's got a decent story. And if you're clever enough to get decent performances and actually get decent sound, you've got a chance, you've got a shot, and you can learn so much. So this is something I kept sort of talking about years ago, because I was out in the process doing it myself all the time. I've made like 30 short films in my career. Some of them have been absolutely piss poor, some of them have been terrible, but I learned something from every one of them. And I've made, well, 4 features really. 3 of which have been sold and made it onto kind of broadcast platforms. That's down to cutting my teeth on short films. And now, flash forward now, 2023. Well, I've still got the same thing. We've still got students like churning out 10-minute scripts. I had one student, so I don't want to kind of give too much away because it'd be really unfair. We haven't actually finished the assessment process, but I'll say this: she's one of the best screenwriters I've come across through all the time. She's just written 2 mind-blowing scripts, and the first thing I said to them was like, "Look, okay, I can say this is great, but I can give you a great mark, and you can walk away chuffed with it, and you can even get your cap and gown on and go, oh, look at me." No one's going to give you anything for that. And the weird thing is, John, the students that I know have really succeeded. Most of them didn't get the top marks.
You leave that room. You leave that room.
Yeah, and I say this to people. I reserve this comment for someone who will get like a low 60s mark or something like that, or even in the 50s. I'll say to them, look, that mark, you're not going to think about this in 10 years' time. If you take the lessons from this and go, actually, there's a core idea that I can use, go and develop it, or you learn something from it and then you do something again, then that's what it's all about. Don't get too precious on the idea.
I've got something for you. When I got serious with writing following university, I've gone to another level, Joe. Another level. I really have studied the craft, and I've really exercised the way I write. But that was my final screenplay I placed in. Poker Face.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's someone's just brought out a film called Poker Face.
Yes, now, I heard it. Yeah.
There's your comments to me 10 years ago. based on my
Bloody hell.
right. I kept it, John. I kept it. This is what it says. Very fair. Parts of this screenplay show real edge and dramatic flair. I like the build-up of tension for both Steve and Ben. And while you flirt with black comedy, there are some deadly serious themes beneath this. Not least the range of mental health issues undergone by your characters. That's 10 years ago, that is, John. While this is easily the strongest work you've produced to date, the last act descends into somewhat of a crime watch reconstruction, rather than the compelling climax this requires. Ben's suicide and Steve's impression of Raoul Moat might scan as genuine consequences, but these plot points need firmer plants earlier in the piece. Much to like, John, a few weeks of workshopping would have benefited this greatly, but you were made all too aware of that earlier in the semester. Still, a much better application. Now, the commentary. This is crazy. This is.
Yeah.
Consider this a very high mark for a student whose workshop contribution was sporadic at best. This is frustrating, as I know you have far more to offer, John. Some very pertinent and some odd references reveal how you have considered visual language and metaphor in writing your script, which is encouraging. J.M. I'd probably say for the first 2 years, my man, I was drunk. And, for halfway through the third year, I got it together. But it was, I still got the mark I wanted to. But it's not about the mark, and that's the point. It's about the hunger you have. It's about the passion, whether you're going to go from university and take this skill set and this environment with you and go further.
I went up to, not everyone's cup of tea like Hollyoaks and all that, but I went up to Line Pictures because I know quite a few people up there. And every time I walk through that place, former students keep approaching me. And several of them are writers now. Now, this is the funny thing I say to my students, and they say, how many people are fans of Hollyoaks? No one puts their hand up. How many of fans are getting paid 10 grand a script? yeah, pick me. Right, okay, well, you're not going to bounce into that job for a start. But if you put yourself about and if you believe that you believe in yourself, but also don't hide your light under a bushel. Because even if your work's got rough-assed, even if you've messed around and been on the ale, or if you've been distracted, or you love what you do, but it's been, you haven't got all the way there. Fine, you've been at university, you're sowing your wild oats, you're doing all those things. Great, get out your system, do it. Carry on doing it if you want. If you're good at it, sometimes it can be good because you can network through it. But the point is, just because I've given you a mark, and I have to give you a mark because I'm an academic as well. So I have to go, how's this work in my little sliding scale? And it's got to work within that. It's got to be absolutely fair. That's why the system is what it is. But within that system, what I can do is say to people, look, what's more important than getting yourself a first or a distinction or a 2-2 or a 2-1? What is more important than that? What's more important is that you walk out, and I ask them this question all the time. I did this last week, just after Easter. I asked them, I said, where do you see yourself in a year's time? That horrible sort of interview question that you sometimes get, where do you see yourself in a year's time? In terms of your students today, what do you tell them? Show, don't tell. Massive. It's the oldest cliche you'll ever hear. But I'm saying this for novelists now as well. So that's how things moved. I think what's behind that? Well, let's take. You're gonna put a gun to my head and say, what's the most important part of screenwriting or writing a screenplay? Aside from research, which is a given, got to do good research. For me, scene directions. Yeah, I tell them that. I say, look at scene direction. So many writers, and I don't just mean students, I mean writers per se, see scene directions as a way to just spray the shit all over the page. And I think something I've been saying to realizing what happens in the minds of writers, and maybe this has changed a little bit. First thing I'll say to them, I never used to do this. I don't know if I did this with you, John. First thing I'll say to them is, write the shit draft. Get it down. do it. In fact, don't have any barriers. Just go for it. Yeah. Haven't done the research. Doesn't matter. Worried about it being formatted incorrectly. Doesn't matter. Worried about this, worried about that. Get it down. Because only then can you start to look at it and edit it and bring it, and writing is rewriting. So that for me is one of the things that's sort of changed, because I've learned over the years that you know, you can kind of try and come up at a high level. You try and come up there when actually you're there. And if you try and come in there, then you're going to have all kinds of problems. You're never going to get anything off the ground. You're going to be worried about whether it's going to be any good or not. Tell yourself it's going to be shit. And then if it's shit, if it's slightly better than shit, then your expectations are raised straight away. And it's a sort of mind trick that you use. But, you know, Ernest Hemingway, famous novelist there, Ernest Hemingway, famously said the first draft of anything is shit. And what I try and do is get writers that I work with over that hump to go, you know what, it doesn't mean that you're shit. And it often means that actually your idea is really good. You know, you're inspired to write something. Yeah, because, you know, Mr. Academic here is going to give you a mark. But you're also inspired to write something because you're passionate about some subject. It doesn't mean you're going to nail it first time. I've never met a writer who nails it first time. You know, just sits there and writes the thing straight off. There's a famous story of Sly Stallone when he wrote Rocky. And he wrote it on over 3 days. He wrote the Oscar-winning screenplay. The thing that started that franchise, and now you've got Creed, you've got all kinds of things. The first film in 75, I think he wrote the script, and it was made in 76. He wrote it in 3 days. He had the story. He based it on a real guy. He based it on someone he had a report about.
What a bean. Former Muhammad Ali. He comes a lot. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But the point is, the reason why he was able to write it in the 3 days is he has everything there. He had the story down, and you can do it that way around. You know, George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, all these books, famously said there's two types of writers. There's gardeners and there's architects.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. There's the architects are the ones who just kind of meticulously have to get everything right. And, you know, the kind of people who, and I encourage to do this, get like index cards and just have every point of story down, especially if you're talking about, you know, feature films and series and stuff like that. Really kind of get that kind of layered complexity down. To understand the mechanics, then you need something tactile. Even in this digital age, use something tactile. Fine. And then you have the gardeners who will just go, I'll just write a bit of screenplay there. Yeah, see how that feels like, you know, get a few actors together, perform it, not feeling it, okay, I'll go back and rewrite it, and I'll just chip away at it. The point is, neither of those philosophies are always going to be right or always going to be wrong. You know, you've got to work out what works for you. The point is, you've got to start somewhere, which is why I say this is something I've been doing more and more the last few years, because I'm realizing that it works actually, because it gets away from this thing of this perception that everyone seems to have that you've got to be absolutely perfect as a writer to get anywhere. And actually, an idea can be rough-assed as hell, but if it connects, if it works, I suppose it's like another boxing analogy. It's that guy who gets slugged all over the place, gets the shit knocked out of him, and then just gets one sweet one right in the kisser, takes him down. End of. It's that sort of thing. You know, don't defeat yourself before it started. You know, 100%. Always go. A lot of psychology goes into it, really, but always go in with the attitude. Yeah, this can be something. And the fact that I've even started working it means that it is going to be something.
It's all about doing. Yeah. I believe that you need the basics in check. You talk about boxing. Most important punch you can throw is the jab. Jab creates distance. The jab allows you to measure distance. The jab allows you to set up other punches. You got to have your basics. When you go back to show, don't tell. I call that the jab. Do you know? Have the jab. Yeah. Thinking in images. Show. Yeah. Put your jab in there. But the rest of it, Steve Bernstein, he was the cinematographer on White Chicks. So he filmed White Chicks, The Waterboy, Blade, Scary Movie. He's a screenwriter.
I saw his podcast. I've actually got his podcast up in front of me now on YouTube.
So with him, what he says is, don't think about it, just write. He goes, I just create a mess. I just write. And I know it's not going to be any good to begin with. Then, because that way I allow all the creativity to come out. Yeah. Go back, I just come out.
Yeah.
Then I construct it and see how I can make it fit. But that's his process. And that's something I'm going to explore myself. Like, it's not the way I do it. I'm definitely an architect. I'm very meticulous in how I like things. But also, as well, it's down to speed and it's down to getting the story out, because I've been sitting on a story for 14 years, John. Haven't wrote it by being an architect. If I'd have been a bit of a messy gardener and just threw it in and, just got it all there, then structured it, probably would have been done 13 years ago. So, it's based on so many different levels, but that's wonderful. That's wonderful insight and proven by experience, and someone that's been navigating through, not only within the industry, but in the education system of teaching that. And in terms of yourself as writing and absorbing knowledge, what's the challenges of teaching? What's the challenges for you having this knowledge here and trying to get someone to understand it, but also, wow, like, God, just can't you see the opportunity you have? You just need to do this, but you can't instill drive in someone. It's there or it's.
Yeah, you're right, and it's the worst thing and the best thing. That what you've just said there is the worst thing and the best thing about it. I'll be completely honest with you. Unfortunately, within higher education, I'm not going to get too political here, but what happens is it's a business in many ways.
Yeah,
and it's a little bit like public transport in my view. I am not anti-business. I'm not. My dad sold typewriters and sewing machines, as well as being a musician. So he understood what business was.
So he sang them to you. He sang them to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, he played the piano to them, but the thing is, with higher education, it's too much of a business. I think it needs to draw back from that and sort of go back to some of the roots of it, where I believe in it being accessible to everyone and being freely available, about like the health system. The point behind that is it stops this kind of thing of classic scenario, right? 18-year-olds comes through across our door, right? Some of them these days not that interested in books, maybe more interested in gaming, but it's like they choose the subject. Why do they choose the subject? Because it's something they feel that you can do. They're not intimidated by it. I'm just coming up with stories and just making stuff up. That's the sort of mentality. Now, some of them will be very, very different to that. Some of them will be really well read, cinema literate as well, and fantastic setup. Boom. Less worried about them, to be honest, because I know at least academically they're going to make it, and it's obvious from the start that they are. Or some of the mature students that come my way, fine. But more and more, I'm getting this polarized sort of thing going on, where I've got to sort of cattle prod some of them to kind of get them going, and some of them respond to it and go, "Fucking hell, something in this. This is interesting. This is fun. I'm sort of inspired by this now." Others, I had this one kid the other day, and honestly, God, he had his headphones on, which some of them had the headphones on, and they're making notes on the laptop, and I'm not going to police this. And I walked up to him. We were doing a writing exercise, and I walked up to him and said, "So what do you think about this?" Like, I can't remember what it was. It was something to do with writing visceral stuff, so writing from the senses. Yeah, and I was giving them taste. So you're biting into a juicy burger, or you're eating something really nice. I came up and said, "What have you got?" And he went, "Huh?" And I went, What have you got?" And he took his headphones off and he went, "Huh?" And I went, "What have you got?" And he went, "I was just watching Futurama." And I just went, and when that happens, it's a test, John. It's a test. Because on the other side, and I was telling you about this other students, the other extreme, is writing this amazing stuff, and honestly, this person could be, could do amazing things, and I'm very confident if she got in the right places, then and got picked up, then some very interesting stuff would happen. So I've got those two sort of poles. Now, what I've noticed happening in the last not even 20 years, 5 years, let's say, is the middle ground's disappearing between one and the other. So there's less middle ground, there's less kind of sort of almost there, but you gotta improve. You've got the ones who are just falling off the edge to the ones who are just incredible. And that's happening more and more and more. And I think it's probably something to do culturally, something to do with the way the world is. Who knows? So I don't know. I think being able to observe that is very interesting to me, because I have that on the one hand, and I am answering your question. I have that on the one hand, which seems to be kind of like a sausage factory, and it can be a bit when you've got the next draft of your novel to write, and there isn't time to get the shopping in, and the wife is, I'm doing hair because I'm not spending any time with it because I'm too busy doing this and that. It can be really galling. But on the other hand, when I've got the summer to go and sell my novel, and it has its benefits, and it's like anything. I have got such a great job. The fact that I'm having this conversation with you now, 10 years after you're with us, is brilliant. I just think I love talking to anyone as a former student, getting their stories and seeing where they're at. That alone is gold dust for me, because it's not just about, here I am, I'm off doing this, I'm doing that's interesting, of course it is. It's actually seeing where someone has put themselves years afterwards, and where some of the ideas that we've discussed, because it's a two-way conversation.
100%.
And sometimes this is massive, right? You mentioned Blake Snyder, you mentioned Christopher Vogel, you mentioned, there's a lot of John York is another one we throw at people these days. There's a lot of sort of craft books, craft materials that are out there. There are even, industrial scripts and some of these online channels that do it as well in a certain way. Robert McKee, people like that. I'm not gonna rain on the parade. I'm not. In some cases, I sometimes espouse what they talk about. But the massive difference for me, I've found working in a hothouse development like I've done, the massive difference, the fundamental difference is that it's happening live. You're able to talk about, in that workshop situation, you're able to talk about a story, an idea, the research. You can diagnose it. And in the very best environments, so let's look at Stranger Things, Duffer Brothers, someone like that. Those guys obviously collaborate with each other, but they've got a writer's room as well. Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan. Yep. They've got a writer's room. A mate of mine was just been working on The Crown, working with Peter Morgan. He had an interesting experience, but the thing is, it's a writer's room. It's a hothouse of ideas, and that's the way most television works. But I think film kind of works in a similar way these days as well. That you're always bouncing your ideas off other people. So to be able to do that at university level, I say to them, "You've got 3 years here. Use it. While you're here, use that, because there's not going to be readily available to you when you have to. Unless, of course, someone like you comes along and goes, well, I have something here. Yeah, brilliant. And that's why I'm all for it, because that's how excellence is created. It's that interaction. It's someone giving their time, whether they're getting paid for it or whether they're doing it from an academic point of view. Kind of no difference in this. Well, there is, but if in this context, it's still a big thing for someone to sit down and read your stuff. For anyone to do that, it's massive. Out of the goodness of the heart, I've got my book I'm trying to get read quotes out of some famous people at the moment. It's out there because what goes on the front of the novel, it's social proof. If someone says, Francis Ford Coppola says this is great, immediately so many more people are going to look at it. If it's just the way we work. It's social proof. We need that. But actually, that works on the level of working in a room full of students. It actually works on the level of working in a room full of kids. This is how we're wired as human beings, and you can't get that from a book. So, and one of my favorite parts of any module that I do is when we're talking about research, because that's when I put my producer head on and I go, "Well, go and talk to this charity about that. If you want to write about domestic violence, then go and talk to a charity that knows about domestic violence, and you're in a safe space to do it. In a sense, it's better to do that than go and speak to your auntie or your uncle or whoever, because they're mostly charged with it. Go and find access to those stories. And it's those little things that make such a big difference.
The detail. It's almost method acting for writers. It's the research, living it, it's seeing it, smelling it, like what's happened here. Because you can't write. I truly believe you do write what you know, but you said something so fantastic at the beginning of all of this, is basically be in love with what you're learning about and learn it inside out. If you don't know it, learn. If you're passionate to learn, you'll get it. And then you can talk about it. But for instance, I couldn't speak on the level of domestic violence that someone who's been through it has, all these charities, because they'll see the holes in it. They'll see the detail that's missing. Yeah, but you'll find actually 9 times out of 10, they go back to the, you wouldn't know if you did the research. Do you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I've got to use my book as the coder here, but, Water Street, started really. I suppose I wrote it. I started writing in 2021, but it was a film treatment years before that, and years before that, it started from a painting of my mum and dad's living room, and I can see Grimshaw painting like an oil. Grimshaw was around in the late Victorian period, 1880s, something like that, and this guy. And check it out. He's probably the most underrated artist out there. Actually, he's incredible. He used to do these sort of really deep watercolors of usually like urban environments. So Glasgow, Birmingham. He did Birmingham, London, Liverpool, and he captured the light in that place like no one else. He was almost like kind of cinematographer of the day. So we had this watercolor that Grimshaw painted, and it sort of took me there. And in a sense, again, something like that, you've got that kind of moody sort of light in the background. I know that's a sort of classic Victorian look, but it's sort of, it's almost like Lowry or something like that. You see all these little figures there and you think, what's their story? They're looking into a shop window. What's their story in that point in time? Did the artist base it on someone who was really standing there? And that's what gets the imagination starts burning from that. You start thinking, wow, where can I say? And that's what took me back to 1863. It wasn't so much something I read in the history book or, this fact or that fact. It was something that it was allowed me to put myself there. I debate with myself whether someone could say bollocks in 1863. Well, is bollocks a word back then? Because the Irish, you listen to someone, I come from a long line of Irish people. I'm very strong Irish. But, you get Irish, the sort of Irish people will turn the air, like, and every second word's F and bollocks and all that, fucking bollocks. And I'm like, did they speak like that then? Or is that something that's happened since? So I've looked into that and it's like, well, yeah, it did happen a bit. Like,
I think it did. I spoke with Steve Bernstein about this, and he says people didn't speak as fantastic English. He said it's probably not too dissimilar to how we speak now. People are still people. And let's be honest, to be educated back in the Victorian times would have been from wealth. Less people had a lot of wealth. More people were poor and impoverished. What's on the streets? Speak like we're in the gutter. But with the Irish aspect, and why I love the Irish, both Liverpool and Birmingham, really well populated with Irish culture, Irish people.
Yeah.
And they're the best of people as well. It's how I feel about Scousers, my man. It's how I feel about
Yeah,
Scousers.
well, that's I'm on the same thing in many ways, but I mean, and that's another thing about this book. It is about at the heart and soul of it. It's Liverpool's one of the oldest melting pots, so it's got the oldest African community in the country. This kind of predates the Windrush by 200 years, and this blows people's mind. Actually, black people walking around Liverpool in the 1600s, because of what it was. You had people just coming off the boats, and it wasn't. There wasn't a direct thing with the slave trade, as in we're that part of the slave triangle, but you had a lot of people coming in, and you did have some slave auctions going on in the city. There was that going on as well. So you've got that kind of massive Chinese influence in Liverpool as well, going back a long time. So I love that sort of, where does that culture come from? Where does that cheeky Scouse thing come from? All that, what some people call victim mentality, self-pity city and all that. Well, it goes back a long way, and there's reasons for it, and there's very, very good reasons for it.
You see, always speak from your own experiences. I can speak very clearly from my experiences in Liverpool. What a welcoming place. What a place filled with art and culture and spirit and community. I've never had an issue in Liverpool. Not one. In a sense where walking down the street, as you'd refer to them as scallies, no one ever said anything to me. I think they're two different worlds. I think there is an underbelly in Liverpool of high criminal activity. You had the largest drug importer in Curtis Warren.
Yeah.
The same in every city. Every city is populated with people. Yeah, and there's different fragments to that. Yeah, but if you would say a scally, I was walking down the road, did they ever cause me an issue? No, because they know I'm not part of that. Do you see what I mean? So Liverpool is a wonderful place, and a place which is loving with a big heart, and a place which will not tolerate to be disrespected. Unlike nowhere should. You go to parts of the world and you disrespect their culture, you're gonna have a massive backlash, because you should do that. There's nothing wrong with having educated conversations and learning more. Like, why do they do this, John? Well, this is the reason, Jonathan. This is what happens.
Wonderful. Well, this is a really interesting part of the discourse, John, because one of the biggest sort of debates that should be happening now is about how places. I believe places have personalities, like individuals have personalities. Places have personalities, and they're built through so many different factors. In our case, history. All of these different, going from being one of the richest cities in the world to being one of the poorest cities in the country, stuff like that. Something that Jeff Young, really well. Jeff has written a book called Ghost Town about the psychogeography and I have a little bit in that because I walked down Lime Street with Jeff, and Lime Street's freaking ridiculous, right? What they did with that street is crazy. They let it go to rot. They had it used to be full of picture palaces and gym palaces. It was an incredible, lively street, and they let it go to rot and eventually demolished it. Big protest. Anyway, long story short, put these great big blocks up, these buildings up, and to take the piss, I think they got an artist to illustrate the building that used to be on the side of the new building. So you've got like a kind of a graphic depiction of an old cinema on the side of where the old cinema used to be.
Wow.
It's flabbergasting. It's jaw-droppingly terrible. Now, the big debate for me, and this connects with storytelling as well, is globalization and whether places can retain their personality and character. Because in a sense, through buildings, everyone lives, they die, we have children, we don't have children, whatever. But what happens is buildings kind of retain that sort of memory. Photographs do that as well, but buildings do that. Which is why it's important to really, really think about this hard in terms of how a place it's not just about commerce and putting a bunch of student flats up and all that. It's about carefully managing the environments around you. And it's called psychogeography. So Jeff's brilliant. I'd recommend Ghost Town to anyone. It's a fantastic book.
When I was at Henry Priestman's gig, there was a guy who was there who was reading it.
Really? Right.
Henry loves it. Henry loves that book. Can't speak of it any higher. It's what a talented guy Jeff is.
Oh, he's incredible.
Talented. He's one of the most humble people I've ever met. He's such a dark horse. He's such an intriguing guy. He's just I'm not going to say too much because he's coming on the podcast. I don't want to spoil.
You're going to get him next. Yeah. Well, no.
Oh, I love Jeff Young.
Yeah.
What a lovely guy, and artistic as well. I didn't know that you drew, that you could draw. That's fantastic. That's rare. I can write. I can't draw.
He's a polymath. He's incredible, Jeff. Well, his connection with the city, and we've got a lot in common as far as that's concerned. I really have. You know, I know my parents' stories and going back to grandparent, going all the way back. I know that sort of that oral tradition. But this is important, and this links into what I said at the beginning, which is to love what you're writing about. And it's not always obvious. People think it's a difficulty I have with younger writers in particular. You know, it's a nature of the beast. You come to university, 18 years old, and I can understand if someone turned around to me and said, well, what am I going to write about? I'm 18. You know, what have I done? Now, don't get me wrong. There are some 18-year-olds who've seen plenty. They've seen enough for fucking, they've had it. And I kind of always know that I've learned how to kind of spot them straight away. And I'm sort of like, I'm a laser onto them. I'm like, okay, use this, use it. But others will have to go on that journey. And that's okay. That's really okay. Everyone knows something. This is the point. Everyone has something. Everyone has a connection. And if you want to be a storyteller, then don't wait. You know, just go. But you got to find that connection somewhere. And if it's not there in the first place, you'll find it through research. You'll find it through asking questions. It's like, shit, did I know that? And that's why, you know, the digital world is often, it confuses people because people think that, oh, it's either digital or it's analog. It's one or the other. I've either got to do this in person or I've got to. Actually, what you do is you do both. You go out and you meet people and you look them in the eye and you get that kind of conversation, and you can either film it, you can put it online, what happens in that process of research is you get your hands dirty and you really start to find stuff out. And because you've done that rather than you've just looked at Wikipedia or just Googled something, you know, that's fine for starters, but you need to dig deeper. You need to find that, and that's a story that no one else will have. If you go and ask that question, then no one else would have had that experience, and that makes it unique straight away.
Massive. And you know what as well? We rely too much today on tertiary sources of information. Yeah. Tertiary in a sense of what we read. Yeah. Go there. For instance, I could read a book on the deepest parts of a jungle in Africa. Yeah, there's your tertiary. But then you need your primary. Go there.
Yeah.
Secondary would be speaking to people that live there, their experiences on an event. Your primary, secondary, tertiary, you're taught that at school, but we almost forget it or we become idle as we get older. Yeah. It's okay to go like, and today this happened. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah. No? And that's a challenge that we're going to be facing with AI, I think. I think that's a challenge where it takes more things away and it takes away some of those skills. So we've got to be mindful of that.
John, I've spoke to people that tell me from a podcast, ironically, you know, like, where did you learn about that? It was on YouTube. Did you question it? Did you do any background reading into it? Did you look further into it? No. The answer is this. You can do this with a pear. You throw it in the air and it flies. But if you tried it, no, but it works. You see? And it will be similar with AI. You know, what's the answer to this? Okay, no, that's the answer. Well, how do you know it's the answer? Because we're now losing the ability to be experts in something because you'll rely on that. As I say, there's nothing wrong in leveraging the process. That's brilliant. You know, it'd be interesting, like, take something you're passionate about, like the history side, in what you're writing about in Liverpool and America and these parts of history. Put it into ChatGPT. See if it can tell you anything else. Double check the information.
Yeah.
That's cool. That to me is cool. But not just like what happened in the war. That's what happened. You don't know. All it's doing is, here's the difference between ChatGPT and Google. It's responsive, has the ability to shape the information as you want it to be shaped. Google gives you the information based on the websites of where it currently exists in the internet. Yeah. One identifies where it is, the other one is able to identify it and be responsive with it.
Yeah.
It's still existing information in public domain.
It's the difference between to get a little bit neurological about this, right? It's the difference between the synapse and an algorithm.
Yeah, there you go.
The synapse is that little electrical connection that happens in your brain where it's like creating ideas or motor functions. It does all these sort of things. And to a certain extent, it happens in your stomach as well. People don't even talk about. That's a weird thing. But anyway, it's the difference between a synapse and a load of numbers working together. And the thing is about a computer at the moment is, yes, it's getting better at it, but essentially what it's doing is remixing everything. So it's taking what is that human input and remixing it and putting it back together again. And it's getting better and better. It'll continue to get better and better. But the point is, you still need, particularly for artistic endeavors, you still need something to go into it. It still needs something to be fed into it.
Pain, suffering, emotion.
Yeah. Emotion. Yeah.
Can't replicate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why, if you're going to ask me, I'm an optimist about this whole thing, particularly in the near future. I'm saying it's an opportunity. Don't get intimidated by it. Don't go, this is going to do us all our jobs. None of us are going to be making films.
John, thank you for not only sharing your story and your journey, but also giving insight into what's, in the teaching world of actually delivering creative writing, whether that be learning about screenwriting or prose or poetry, but giving insight of how you approach that and the challenges that you overcome to deliver the landscape in education. Thank you.
Cool, man. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. And as said before, I love you, man. And thank you ever so much for not giving up on me and, always giving giving me a chance. Give me a chance. And obviously that is a two-way street. You've got to put in the work to get it out. But, it's an honor to have been under your mentorship. And it's also an honor to still be able to have a conversation with you 10 years on. Thank you.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. You keep doing this. Cool.
Yeah. Go with Jeff Young coming on, haven't we? So
absolute pleasure, mate. Absolute pleasure.
And to our audience, I hope you've enjoyed another fantastic episode. Stay great and be seen. Thank you.